Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Speak Smart podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Today, we're diving deep into the world of public speaking.
Right.
You know, it can be nerve-wracking for some,
It can.
but it's oh so important.
Absolutely.
We've got a fantastic podcast episode lined up for you,
Yeah, we do.
packed with insights and techniques that I think even seasoned speakers might find useful.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So what do you think of this episode?
Oh, I thought it was really great.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. We often think of like great speakers as having this like innate talent,
Right.
but the source material really emphasizes that public speaking is a skill.
Okay.
Like playing an instrument or learning a new language.
Yeah.
Anyone can improve with the right approach and practice.
That's encouraging.
Yeah.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty,
Sure.
let's set the stage.
Okay.
What does this podcast episode highlight as the core ingredients
Yeah.
of a truly captivating speaker?
Well, they use this analogy of a house.
Which I found quite helpful. They say a strong foundation is built on clarity and confidence.
Okay.
So you need to know your message inside and out
Yeah.
and deliver it with conviction. Makes sense.
Yeah.
A shaky foundation won't hold up a good speech,
Right?
just like it wouldn't support a house.
Exactly.
That's what?
Then they talk about the walls,
Okay.
which represent the connection you build with your audience. It's about engaging them, making eye contact, using body language that conveys openness and energy.
And I imagine the roof is all about structure, right?
Yes.
Making sure the speech is well organized and has a clear flow.
You got it.
Okay.
They emphasize the classic introduction, main point, and conclusion format.
Right.
But what's interesting is they suggest thinking of the introduction as a hook
Okay.
that grabs the audience's attention right from the start.
Right.
They even recommend trying techniques used in storytelling and filmmaking to really draw people in.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm already getting ideas
I know, right?
for my next presentation.
Uh-huh.
But what about those of us who get butterflies in our stomachs?
Oh, yeah.
Just thinking about public speaking?
Yeah.
Any tips
Sure.
for calming those pre-speech jitters?
This podcast episode has a whole section on that.
Oh.
I know you'll appreciate.
Yeah.
They talk about the power of deep breathing exercises to regulate your heart rate and calm your nerves.
Okay.
They even suggest a technique where you visualize yourself giving a successful speech,
Okay.
feeling confident and connecting with the audience.
Visualization.
Yeah.
Like athletes do.
Exactly.
I've heard about that.
Uh-huh.
But I never thought to apply it to public speaking.
Apparently, it's incredibly effective.
Okay.
The idea is to create a positive mental image that boosts your confidence and reduces anxiety.
All right.
They also emphasize practicing, of course, but not just in front of a mirror.
Oh.
They suggest recording yourself and analyzing your body language, tone, and pacing.
That's actually a really good idea.
Yeah.
I've never thought to record myself before. I bet it would be super insightful,
Uh-huh.
even a little cringy at first.
Probably.
But think of it as constructive criticism
Right.
from your most honest critic, yourself.
Exactly.
The podcast episode also dives into the importance of knowing your audience,
Yeah.
which I think is a key element often overlooked.
For sure.
You're so right.
Yeah.
Tailoring your message to your audience can make all the difference.
Absolutely.
But how do you really get to know your audience,
Right.
especially if you've never met them before?
Well, the podcast has some great tips for that.
Okay.
They suggest doing research beforehand if possible.
Right.
Look into their demographics, interests,
Right.
and even their potential biases or expectations.
And even if you don't have a ton of time for research,
Right. You can still try to get a feel for the room
Yeah.
by arriving early, chatting with people,
exactly.
observing their body language. I love that tip about arriving early. It's such a simple thing,
It is.
but it can really help you feel more connected to the people you're about to speak to.
Right.
And once you have a sense of your audience, you can start thinking about how to make your message resonate with them.
Yes.
The podcast emphasizes the power of storytelling,
Yeah, definitely.
which we touched on earlier.
We did.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Stories are so powerful.
They are.
They can make complex information more relatable, evoke emotions, and help people remember key points.
Exactly.
And the podcast goes even further.
Oh, yeah?
Suggesting you think about the specific types of story
Right.
that would resonate with your particular audience. For example, if you're speaking to a group of business professionals,
You might share a story about a successful entrepreneur who overcame challenges.
right?
But if you're speaking to a group of students, you might share a story about your own personal journey and the lessons you learned along the way.
It's all about finding that sweet spot where your story intersects with their interests and experiences.
And speaking of keeping your audience engaged, the podcast also dives into the importance of using visual aids effectively.
Yes.
Visual aids are great, but I've definitely seen some presentations where they were more distracting than helpful.
Right.
Any tips on using them strategically?
Well, the podcast emphasizes the less is more approach.
Okay.
Don't overload your slides with text or complicated graphics. Instead, use visuals that enhance your message, like powerful images, charts that illustrate data clearly, or short video clips that add impact.
And I imagine it's important to make sure your visuals are high quality.
Oh, for sure.
And easy to see from anywhere in the room.
Absolutely.
There's nothing worse than a blurry image or a font that's too small to read.
They also suggest incorporating movement and transitions into your slides to keep the audience's attention. Think subtle animations or a dynamic slide layout that guides the eye.
It's all about creating a visually engaging experience.
Exactly.
That complements your spoken words.
Yes.
Now, another technique the podcast highlights is voice modulation.
Right.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much impact you can create simply by varying your tone, pitch, and volume. It can make your presentation more dynamic, emphasize key points, and even convey emotion.
So instead of speaking in a monotone voice, you want to think about how you can use your voice as an instrument to add depth and nuance to your message.
Precisely.
Okay.
And don't forget about the power of the pause.
Right.
A well-timed pause can create suspense, emphasize a point, or simply give your audience a moment to process information.
Pauses are so important.
They are.
I used to be afraid of silence.
Yeah.
But I've learned that it can be incredibly effective when used strategically.
For sure.
It can create a sense of anticipation and make your words even more impactful.
It's like the white space in a painting. It gives the eye a place to rest and allows the other elements to stand out.
Oh, that's a great analogy. So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From the foundational elements of a good speech to specific techniques for engaging your audience. But what about the practice itself?
Yeah, practice is essential. But the podcast emphasizes that it's not just about rehearsing your speech word for word. It's about practicing your delivery, your body language, your connection with the audience. And they suggest getting feedback from trusted friends or mentors who can give you honest and constructive criticism.
That's so valuable.
It is.
Sometimes it's hard to be objective about our own performance.
Right.
So having an outside perspective can really help us identify areas where we can improve.
Exactly.
And they even suggest recording yourself and analyzing your presentation from the audience's perspective.
Yes.
It can be a bit cringy at first, but it's an incredibly effective way to spot habits or mannerisms you might not even be aware of.
For sure.
You know, it's funny. We're talking about all these techniques and strategies. But it seems like confidence is really at the heart of it all.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The podcast emphasizes that confidence is not about being arrogant or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about believing in yourself and your message.
But how do you build that confidence?
Yeah.
Especially if you're naturally shy or introverted.
Well, the podcast talks about the importance of preparation.
Okay.
When you know your material inside and out, you automatically feel more confident. They also suggest focusing on your strengths.
Right.
What are you good at?
Okay.
What unique perspective can you bring to the table?
I love that.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we all have something valuable to offer. And that our individuality is an asset, not a liability.
Exactly.
And don't forget about the power of positive self-talk.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of focusing on your fears,
Right.
try to reframe your thoughts in a more positive light.
Yeah.
So instead of thinking, what if I mess up?
Yeah.
You might think, I'm excited to share this information with the audience.
Exactly.
And the more you practice,
Yeah.
and the more successful presentations you give, the more your confidence will grow.
Right?
It's a positive feedback loop.
It is.
This is all so insightful.
Yeah.
I'm already feeling more confident just talking about it.
Good.
But I know there's so much more to explore,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to handling Q&A sessions.
Right.
And those unexpected moments that can throw even the most seasoned speaker off their game.
For sure.
And those are topics that deserve their own dedicated deep dive.
Right.
And luckily,
Yes.
that's exactly what we'll be doing
We will.
in the next part of this episode.
I can't wait.
So stay tuned.
See you there. Welcome back to the Speak Smart podcast.
I'm so ready to dive into this.
Yeah.
We were just talking about the foundations of good public speaking.
Right.
But I really want to get into what I consider the trickier aspects.
Oh, for sure.
Like the Q&A session and those unexpected curveballs that can really throw you off.
They can make you sweat a little.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Those are the moments I dread the most. It feels like anything can happen.
Right.
And you have to think on your feet
You do.
and maintain your composure no matter what.
Absolutely.
Well, the good news is
Yeah.
this podcast that we're deep diving into has a whole section dedicated to navigating these situations with grace and confidence.
Yeah.
So let's start with the Q&A sessions,
Okay.
which can often feel like a minefield.
Oh, they can?
You never know what kind of questions people are going to ask.
Right.
Sometimes it feels like they're trying to catch you out or challenge your expertise.
I think it's important to kind of reframe that perspective.
Okay.
The podcast encourages us to see the Q&A sessions as opportunities, not threats.
Okay.
They're a chance to further engage your audience, clarify points,
Right.
and even showcase your knowledge and passion for the topic.
Okay. I can see that.
Yeah.
But how do you actually prepare for the unpredictable?
Right.
You can't anticipate every single question.
You can't.
Someone might ask, can you?
Well, you're right. You can't predict every single question.
Yeah.
But you can certainly prepare for the most likely ones.
Okay.
The podcast suggests brainstorming potential questions beforehand.
Okay.
Think about the different angles people might come from,
Yeah.
doubts they might have, and even the tricky or controversial aspects of your topic.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
If you've already thought through those potential questions, you're less likely to be caught off guard.
Right.
You'll have a framework
Yes.
for formulating your responses.
Exactly.
And even if someone asks a question that you haven't anticipated,
Right.
you can still use the same principles of active listening, thoughtful analysis,
Yeah.
and clear communication to craft a response.
I think that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, it's about applying those same principles of good public speaking
Right.
to a slightly different format.
Precisely.
The podcast also emphasizes the importance of active listening
Yes.
during Q&A sessions.
Yeah.
It's tempting to start formulating your answer
Oh, yeah.
while the person is still speaking,
Right.
but that can lead to misinterpretations
Absolutely.
or missed opportunities to really connect
Yeah.
with the questioner.
That's a good reminder.
Active listening shows respect
It does.
for the person asking the question.
Uh-huh.
And it ensures that you fully understand their perspective
Right.
before you jump in with a response.
And don't forget about the rest of the audience.
Right.
The podcast recommends repeating the question.
Oh, that's a great tip.
Yeah.
For the benefit of everyone in the room.
Exactly.
It not only ensures that everyone heard the question,
Right.
but it also gives you a few extra seconds to gather your thoughts and craft your response.
It's a win-win.
It is.
And speaking of responding,
Yeah.
the podcast has some insightful advice
Okay.
on how to deliver those answers effectively. They encourage us to be concise
Right.
and to the point, avoiding those long-winded tangents that might lose the audience's attention.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I've definitely been in presentations where the Q&A session dragged on forever.
Right.
Because the speaker went off on tangents.
Yes.
Or got bogged down in overly detailed explanations.
It's a common pitfall.
Yeah.
The key is to strike a balance
Okay.
between providing enough information to answer the question thoroughly and keeping your response engaging
Right.
and easy to follow.
Yeah.
If a question requires a more in-depth explanation, you can always offer to discuss it further after the presentation.
That's a good strategy.
Yeah.
It shows that you're willing to engage with the audience, but also respectful of everyone's time.
Right.
Now, what about those moments when you simply don't know the answer to a question?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a fear a lot of speakers have, being put on the spot.
Right.
Not having the information at their fingertips.
You know, it's interesting.
Yeah.
The podcast actually encourages us to embrace those, I don't know, moments.
Really? I would have thought that admitting you don't know something would undermine your credibility.
That's a common misconception.
Okay.
But the podcast argues that trying to bluff your way through a question
that you don't know the answer to can actually do more harm than good.
Right.
It's much better to be upfront.
Okay.
And say something like, that's a great question, and I don't have the answer right now. But I'd be happy to do some research and get back to you.
I guess it's about showing a willingness to learn.
Yeah.
And a commitment to providing accurate information.
It is.
Even if it means admitting you don't have all the answers in the moment.
Exactly.
It's not about having all the answers. It's about how you handle those moments of uncertainty.
Yeah.
If you can stay calm, composed, and show a genuine desire to learn, your audience will respect you even more for it.
I agree.
This is all so insightful.
It is.
I'm already feeling more confident about handling Q&A sessions. But I know there's another side to this public speaking coin.
Okay.
Those unexpected situations that can crop up out of nowhere.
Oh, yeah.
And throw you completely off your game.
You're right. Those are the curveballs that can really test your mettle.
They do.
As a speaker. But don't worry, the podcast has some excellent advice.
Okay, on how to navigate those moments with grace and resilience.
Okay. I'm all ears. Let's hear what they have to say.
All right.
About tackling those unexpected challenges. Welcome back to the Speak Smart Podcast. We're in the final stretch of our deep dive into public speaking, and I'm ready to talk about those unexpected situations.
Yeah.
They can pop up and just throw even the most seasoned speaker off their game.
Absolutely.
You know, like when the microphone decides to take a vacation.
Right
in the middle of your presentation.
It happens.
Oh, yeah.
Those moments can feel like mini disasters in the making.
You can.
But this podcast offers some really practical advice on how to handle them with grace and even a touch of humor.
Okay, I'm all for turning lemons into lemonade.
Yes.
Especially on stage. So let's start with those dreaded technical difficulties. You know, we've all been there. We have...
The slide projector freezes. The microphone cuts out.
Right.
The video you meticulously queued up decides to play a never-ending loading screen.
It's like a speaker's worst nightmare come to life.
It is.
But the podcast emphasizes that it's not about avoiding technical difficulties altogether.
Okay.
Because, let's face it, technology has a mind of its own sometimes.
Yeah, it does.
It's about having a backup plan.
So what kind of backup plan are we talking about?
Okay.
Should I be carrying around a spare microphone, projector bulb in my bag of tricks?
You could, but maybe start with something a bit more practical.
Okay.
The podcast suggests always having printed copies of your slides or notes on hand.
Okay.
That way, if the technology fails, you can seamlessly transition to a low-tech approach.
That's a brilliant tip.
Yeah.
I've definitely been in presentations where the speaker just froze and panicked when the slides wouldn't advance.
Right.
Having those printed copies would be a lifesaver in that situation.
So it's all about having a plan B.
Yes.
And maybe even a plan C.
Right.
So you're not completely derailed when those tech gremlins strike.
And remember, a little bit of humor can go a long way in diffusing the tension.
Yeah.
Acknowledge the technical difficulty with a smile.
Okay.
Maybe make a lighthearted comment about the joys of modern technology.
Yeah.
And then smoothly transition to your backup plan.
I love that approach.
Yeah.
It's about turning that potentially awkward moment into an opportunity to connect with your audience.
Yeah.
And show them that you're human too.
Exactly.
Now, what about audience interruptions?
Oh, yeah.
I've seen speakers handle those in very different ways. From politely ignoring them to engaging in full-blown debates with audience members.
It's a tricky situation.
It is.
You want to be respectful of your audience and their perspectives.
Yeah.
But you also need to maintain control of the flow of your presentation.
Right.
The podcast suggests a balanced approach.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
Right.
What's this balanced approach all about?
The key is to acknowledge the interruption.
Yeah.
Without letting it derail your presentation.
Right.
You might say something like,
okay,
that's a great point, and I'd love to discuss it further during the Q&A session. For now, let's stay focused on this particular aspect of the topic.
I like that.
Yeah.
It shows that you're listening, that you value their input, but also that you have a plan.
Right.
And you're committed to sticking to it.
Exactly. It's about being assertive, but not aggressive.
Right.
And about guiding the conversation back on track without making the audience member feel dismissed or ignored.
And what about those moments when you lose your train of thought?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you get distracted by something in the audience.
Right.
Or you blank on a key point you wanted to make.
Happens to the best of us.
That's happened to me before.
Yeah.
And it can be so flustering.
It can.
It's a common experience.
It is.
And the podcast offers some excellent advice.
Okay. On how to recover smoothly.
Right.
The key, they say, is not to panic.
Don't panic.
Take a deep breath, collect your thoughts,
Okay.
and if you need to refer back to your notes.
I think it's that moment of panic that often makes things worse.
It does.
You start to overthink it. Your heart races.
Yeah.
And you feel like everyone in the room is staring at you,
Yeah.
judging your every move.
The podcast emphasizes that most audiences are actually very understanding and forgiving.
That's good.
They know that public speaking is challenging, and they're not expecting perfection.
So give yourself permission to be human,
Yes.
to make mistakes, and to recover gracefully.
It's such a relief to hear that.
It is.
I think we often put so much pressure on ourselves
We do.
to be perfect.
Yeah.
But the reality is that audiences are much more interested in authenticity and connection.
Exactly. And if you can laugh at yourself
Right.
and turn that moment of fluster into a relatable human experience, it can actually endear you to your audience even more.
I agree.
Now, what about those times when you get negative feedback or pushback from the audience?
Yeah.
Maybe someone disagrees with your point of view, or their body language just screams disapproval.
Right.
How do you handle those potentially confrontational moments?
The podcast encourages us to approach those situations with respect
Okay.
and a willingness to understand the other person's perspective.
Okay.
Remember, disagreement doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Right.
It can actually lead to a more dynamic and engaging discussion.
So I'm starting to see a theme here.
Yeah. What's that?
It's all about staying calm, composed, and respectful, no matter what challenges arise.
You got it. And remember, you don't have to agree with everyone in the audience.
Right.
But you should always treat them with courtesy and professionalism.
Yeah.
If someone's being particularly disruptive or disrespectful, you can always address the behavior directly,
Okay.
but always maintain a calm and respectful tone.
It's about setting boundaries while still fostering a positive and inclusive environment. Now, one final point I want to touch on is time management.
Okay.
It's so easy to get carried away with your topic
It is.
and lose track of time,
Right.
especially if you're passionate about what you're talking about.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
Yeah.
But the podcast reminds us that respecting our audience's time is just as important as delivering a compelling presentation.
So any tips on how to keep things on track
Sure.
without rushing through our material or leaving out important points?
The podcast recommends practicing your presentation beforehand
Okay.
and timing yourself to make sure you're within the allotted time frame.
Right.
And if you find yourself running short on time, be prepared to summarize
Okay.
or prioritize your remaining points.
So it's all about being flexible and adaptable
Yes.
and about focusing on the most impactful elements
Right.
of your presentation.
This has been such an incredible deep dive
Yes.
into the world of public speaking.
We've covered everything from the foundational elements
Yeah, we
of a good speech to those nail-biting moments of Q&A
Right.
and unexpected situations.
It's been a pleasure exploring these strategies with you.
It has.
Remember, public speaking is a skill that can be developed and honed with practice and the right techniques.
Absolutely. So to wrap things up,
Okay.
let's remind our listeners of the key takeaways from this deep dive.
Preparation is paramount.
Yes.
Know your audience, structure your speech effectively,
Right.
and practice beforehand.
Embrace those Q&A sets as opportunities to further engage your audience
For sure.
and handle unexpected situations with grace and professionalism.
Use storytelling visual aids and voice modulation
Yes.
to make your presentations dynamic and engaging.
And above all, believe in yourself and your message.
Yes.
Public speaking is a powerful tool for sharing your ideas and connecting with others.
Thank you for joining us on the Speak.
We hope you found these insights valuable
Yes.
and that you feel empowered to step onto that stage with confidence and authenticity.